"Take me home, cowboy," the Apache woman said when he heard the town call her, less than human. The desert town woke slowly each morning, as if the sun itself had to convince the land to begin again. Dust moved across empty streets, and wooden buildings stood quietly, holding stories that few people spoke about anymore. Ethan Cole rode into town just after sunrise, his horse moving at an easy pace. He preferred arriving early, before crowds formed and conversations became loud. Silence suited him better. Ethan had lived near the edge of the desert for years. His ranch was small but steady, far enough from town that he could avoid trouble but close enough to trade supplies when needed. He was known as a man who worked hard and spoke little. People respected him but did not know him well, and that was how he liked it. On this particular morning, something felt different. As he tied his horse outside the general store, he heard raised voices. A small group had gathered nearby, their attention focused on someone standing alone. Ethan did not usually involve himself in town disputes, but curiosity made him glance in that direction. At the center of the crowd stood a young Apache woman. Her dark hair moved slightly in the wind, and her expression remained calm even though the people around her spoke sharply. Some whispered behind their hands. Others stared openly, as if trying to decide whether she belonged there or not. Ethan watched quietly. He could not hear every word, but he understood enough to feel uncomfortable. The tone of the crowd was not welcoming. The woman stood straight, refusing to show weakness, yet there was a loneliness in her eyes that stayed with him. The shopkeeper eventually stepped forward and told the crowd to move along. People dispersed slowly, still murmuring as they left. The woman remained standing alone for a moment before turning away. Ethan told himself it was none of his business. He entered the store, collected the supplies he needed, and paid without speaking much. Yet as he walked back outside, he noticed her again, sitting on a wooden bench near the street. She seemed tired but alert, watching everything around her carefully. He hesitated. Normally, he would leave without another thought, but something about her presence pulled at him, a quiet feeling he could not ignore. He approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "You new here?" he asked, his voice calm. She looked at him, studying his face before answering. "Yes," she said simply. Her voice carried strength despite exhaustion. Ethan nodded, unsure what else to say. He offered her a small bottle of water from his supplies. She accepted after a brief pause. "Thank you," she said. He gave a short nod and returned to his horse, unsure why the small interaction felt important. As days passed, Ethan noticed her more often. She moved through town with determination, asking for work, offering help, trying to build a place for herself. Yet many doors closed before she could even explain what she needed. Some people avoided her. Others spoke to her in ways that felt unfair. Ethan watched from a distance at first. He told himself that every stranger faced challenges in a new place. But the way people treated her felt different, colder, heavier. One afternoon, a strong wind began pushing sand across the streets. Ethan saw her struggling to secure a small bag near the diner. Without thinking, he stepped forward and helped tie it down before the wind could carry it away. She looked at him again, this time with a hint of curiosity. "You help without asking questions," she said. He shrugged. "Wind doesn't wait." A small smile touched her face, brief but genuine. They spoke for a few minutes. Her name was Tala. She had traveled far, leaving behind a life that no longer felt safe. She did not share every detail, and Ethan did not ask. He understood the value of silence. Over time, their conversations grew slightly longer. They spoke about weather, work, and the challenges of desert living. Tala revealed that she was trying to start fresh, hoping to find a place where she could belong without judgment. Ethan admired her determination. He knew how hard it was to rebuild after loss. Years earlier, he had lost more than he ever spoke about. The memory had taught him to avoid connections, to keep life simple and predictable. Yet Tala's presence began changing his routine. He found himself looking for her when he arrived in town. If he saw someone treating her unfairly, a quiet tension rose inside him. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Ethan found her sitting alone near the edge of town. The desert stretched endlessly behind her, quiet and vast. She looked tired that day, more than usual. "They don't see me," she said softly, as if continuing a conversation that had already begun. Ethan sat nearby but did not interrupt. After a moment she continued, "They look, but they don't see." He understood more than she knew. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand, he said. She glanced at him. And you? I try to understand, he replied. Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward. The wind carried the smell of dry earth, and for a moment the world felt calm. As darkness approached, Ethan stood to leave. Tala watched him carefully. Why are you kind when others are not? She asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. He paused, searching for an answer, but finding none that felt complete. Finally, he said, maybe because someone once was kind to me. She nodded slowly, accepting the simple explanation. As Ethan rode away, he felt something shift inside him, a feeling he had avoided for years. He realized that helping her might bring attention he did not want, yet ignoring her felt impossible now. Back at his ranch, he tried to focus on work, but thoughts of the town and its quiet tension stayed with him. The desert night felt heavier than usual. The next morning, he returned to town earlier than needed. He told himself it was coincidence, but deep down he knew he wanted to see whether Tala was still there, still standing strong against a place that did not yet understand her. The next morning, the town felt different, though nothing on the surface had changed. The same wooden buildings stood under the bright desert sky. The same dust rolled through the streets. The same people gathered outside the diner and the general store. But for Ethan Cole, something had shifted. He arrived earlier than usual. He told himself he needed extra supplies, but deep down he knew he wanted to see if Tala was still there. She was. She stood near the well, speaking to Mrs. Harper, who owned a small laundry shop. Tala's voice was calm, steady. She was asking for work, not for charity. Not for sympathy, just for work. Mrs. Harper listened but kept glancing toward the other women nearby, as if worried about what they might think. After a moment, Mrs. Harper shook her head politely. Tala nodded once, thanked her, and stepped back. She did not argue. She did not beg, but Ethan saw the small change in her eyes. He tied his horse slowly, watching from a distance. A few men standing near the saloon began whispering. Their words were not loud, but their tone carried a sharp edge. One of them laughed, and though Ethan could not hear exactly what was said, he knew it was about her. Tala walked past them without looking their way. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He had lived in this town most of his life. He knew its people. He knew their habits. Some were kind, some were proud, some feared change, but today their silence felt heavier than usual. Inside the general store, talk continued. When Ethan stepped up to the counter, he heard someone say, "She won't last long here." Another replied, "People like her never do." Ethan placed his coins down harder than necessary. The sound made the room go quiet for a moment. He looked at the shopkeeper. "Anything else?" he asked calmly. The shopkeeper shook his head. Ethan stepped outside again, his mind unsettled. Tala was now helping an older man pick up spilled feed near his wagon. She moved quickly, gathering the scattered grain with care. The old man seemed grateful but nervous, glancing around as if worried someone might judge him for accepting her help. When the work was done, he handed her a small coin. She hesitated, then accepted it with a quiet thank you. Ethan walked toward them. The older man gave him a short nod and drove away. "You don't rest much," Ethan said gently. She gave a faint smile. "Rest does not build a future." He studied her face. "You should not have to work twice as hard just to stand still." Tala brushed dust from her hands. "Sometimes that is the only way forward." They stood there for a moment, the wind moving between them. Ethan noticed that despite everything, she still carried herself with dignity. She did not shrink, she did not show anger, but he could sense her weariness. "Did you find a place to stay?" he asked. "For now," she replied. "A small room behind the diner, it is enough." Her answer was simple, but Ethan could tell it was not comfortable. The diner owner, Mr. Collins, was known for charging high rent for even the smallest space. As the day continued, more small moments added to the weight in the air. A group of children pointed at Tala and whispered. A woman crossed the street rather than pass by her. A man refused to shake her hand after she offered to help fix a broken cartwheel. Each time, Tala remained calm. Each time, Ethan felt his silence grow heavier. By late afternoon, clouds gathered on the horizon. A sandstorm was coming. The desert had a way of reminding everyone who truly held power. People began securing their doors and windows. Wagons were pulled closer to buildings. Animals were tied down. Ethan noticed Tala standing near the edge of town, looking toward the approaching storm. Instead of running for cover, she moved toward a family struggling to bring their goats inside a fence. Without hesitation, she joined them, guiding the animals quickly and efficiently. She spoke in a firm but gentle tone, calming both the children and the frightened animals. Ethan watched in quiet surprise. She knew what she was doing. The wind picked up fast, pushing sand through the streets. Visibility dropped. The family hurried inside just before the storm hit fully. Ethan rode toward the stables to secure his horse. Through the blowing sand, he saw Tala moving from one place to another, helping where she could, closing shutters, tying ropes tighter, guiding an elderly woman safely across the street. She did not act like someone trying to prove herself. She simply helped. The storm lasted longer than expected. When it finally passed, the town looked shaken but intact. People stepped outside cautiously. They began noticing small details, the secure fences, the tied wagons, the animals safe in place. Slowly, whispers changed tone. "Who tied this rope?" someone asked. "I think it was her," another replied quietly. Ethan walked through the street checking damage. He found Tala near the well again, brushing sand from her clothes. "You should have taken shelter," he said. She met his gaze calmly. Others needed it more. For the first time, he saw uncertainty in her expression, not fear but doubt. "Even after today," she said softly, "they will still see me as different." Ethan paused. He wanted to disagree, but he knew change did not happen in one afternoon. "They saw what you did," he said carefully. "That matters." She looked toward the fading sky. "Does it?" Before he could answer, Mr. Collins approached. The diner owner cleared his throat awkwardly. "Thank you," he said, not meeting her eyes fully. "For helping my sister with her shutters." Tala nodded politely. It was a small acknowledgement, but in this town, small things carried weight. That evening, as the sky turned deep purple, Ethan found himself sitting beside her near the quiet edge of town again. "You could leave," he said after a long silence. "Find a place that welcomes you faster." She considered his words. "And if every place waits for someone else to change first?" she asked. He had no easy reply. She continued, "I do not want to run forever. I want to stand somewhere and not be moved." Her words settled into him. For years, Ethan had chosen distance. He had built a life where no one expected much from him, and he expected little in return. It was safe. But watching Tala stand firm against quiet rejection made him question that safety. As they sat there, a few townspeople walked by. This time their stares were less sharp, curious perhaps, thoughtful. Change was slow, but it had begun. Tala turned to him again. "You did not speak against them," she said gently, "but you did not join them either." He looked down at his hands. "Sometimes silence feels easier." "And sometimes," she asked, he met her eyes, "sometimes it feels wrong." The wind softened as night settled over the desert. The town lights flickered on one by one. For the first time, Ethan understood that standing beside someone did not always require loud words. But he also knew that a day would come when silence would no longer be enough. The days after the storm felt quieter, but the silence carried tension beneath it. The town had seen Tala's strength, yet old habits do not disappear overnight. Some people greeted her politely now. Others still kept their distance. Respect was beginning to grow, but trust was fragile. Ethan noticed the difference right away. When he rode into town, fewer whispers followed Tala. A few shop doors stayed open longer when she approached. Still, there were eyes that watched her carefully, as if waiting for a reason to doubt her again. Tala did not change her routine. Each morning she looked for work. Each afternoon she helped where she could. Each evening she returned to the small room behind the diner. She never complained, but Ethan could see the tiredness building behind her steady expression. One afternoon, he found her repairing a broken fence near the edge of town. The wood was worn and the nails were bent, but she worked with skill and patience. "You've done this before," Ethan said. She smiled faintly. "Where I come from, everyone learns to fix what is broken." He handed her a better hammer from his saddlebag. Their hands brushed briefly, and he felt how rough her palms were from constant work. "Why didn't you tell them you knew how to do this?" he asked. "I did," she replied. "They just did not listen." Her answer stayed with him long after he rode away. Later that week, a problem rose that would test everything. Mr. Dawson, a ranch owner on the south side of town, claimed that someone had taken supplies from his storage shed. Nothing major, just tools and rope. But in a small town, suspicion spreads quickly. By evening, the rumor had already reached every corner of the street. Ethan walked into the saloon to hear raised voices. Mr. Dawson stood near the center, angry and loud. "She was seen near my land yesterday," he said. No one needed to ask who he meant. Ethan's jaw tightened. Seen near it does not mean she took anything, he said calmly. Mr. Dawson turned toward him. You defending her now? I'm asking for proof, Ethan replied. The room grew still. Some men shifted uncomfortably. Others waited to see how the exchange would end. Outside, Tala was unaware of the conversation. She was helping Mrs. Harper carry a basket of clean clothes across the street. When she noticed the crowd forming, she stopped walking. Mr. Dawson stepped outside, his voice still sharp. You were near my shed yesterday. Yes, Tala answered evenly. The wind knocked part of your fence down. I fixed it. He hesitated slightly but continued, and now my tools are missing. She met his gaze directly. I did not take them. The silence that followed felt heavy. A few people looked uncertain. Others looked ready to believe the worst without question. Ethan stepped forward. Has anyone checked the north side of the property? He asked. The storm pushed debris everywhere. Mr. Dawson frowned. I checked the main shed. That storm moved more than sand, Ethan said. Let's look properly. Reluctantly, Mr. Dawson agreed. Several townspeople followed, curious. They rode out together. Tala walked beside them quietly, her shoulders straight. Ethan stayed near her without making a show of it. When they reached the property, it did not take long to see what had happened. The storm had damaged part of the fencing on the far side, and some tools had fallen into a shallow ditch, covered by sand and brush. Mr. Dawson stood staring at the evidence. His anger faded, replaced by embarrassment. They were here all along, someone muttered. Ethan said nothing. He simply looked at Tala. Mr. Dawson cleared his throat. Seems I was mistaken. Tala nodded once. Storms move many things. Her voice carried no anger, no bitterness, just truth. As they returned to town, the mood shifted. People walked more quietly. A few offered Tala small apologies, not grand speeches, but enough to show they understood their mistake. That evening, Ethan found her sitting alone again at the edge of town. The sunset painted the desert in soft gold. You could have been angry, he said. Anger would not have changed what they believe, she replied. But you were right. She looked out across the open land. Being right is not always enough. Her calm strength both inspired and unsettled him. He realized how much weight she carried every day, not just proving her skills, but proving her character. After a long silence, she spoke again. Where I grew up, we were taught that respect must be earned through action, but here I must earn it twice. Ethan understood. That is not fair. She gave a small, tired smile. Fairness is not something the desert promises. For the first time, Ethan shared more of his own story. He spoke of the years when his family ranch failed, of how neighbors once turned away when he needed help, of how he learned to survive alone because depending on others felt risky. I stopped expecting kindness, he admitted. And did that protect you? She asked gently. He thought about it. It kept me from being disappointed. But it also kept you alone, she said. Her words struck deeper than he expected. In the days that followed, something changed in the town. The misunderstanding with Mr. Dawson made people pause before speaking too quickly. A few began asking Tala about her background. They listened to her stories about the land, about learning survival skills from elders, about respecting nature. Children began following her when she demonstrated how to read tracks in the sand. Women asked her advice on preserving food during heat waves. Small bridges formed quietly, yet not everyone was ready to change. A handful of men continued to avoid her. They spoke less openly now, but their doubt lingered. Ethan noticed it all. He also noticed how often Tala carried herself with quiet dignity despite it. One evening, as they walked back from checking a repaired fence, she stopped and looked at him seriously. You stand beside me now, she said, but this may cost you. He understood what she meant. In small towns, taking a side can divide friendships. I have stood alone before, he said. I know that feeling. And, she asked, it is not one I wish on anyone else. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The desert wind moved gently around them. Tala's voice softened. I do not need rescuing. I know, Ethan replied. That's not why I stand here. She studied him carefully, as if measuring the truth in his words. You stand because it feels right, she said finally. He nodded. That night, as stars filled the wide desert sky, Ethan realized something important. The town's judgment had forced him to choose between comfort and courage, and slowly he was choosing courage. Tala had not asked him to fight her battles. She had not demanded defense. She had simply stood firm in who she was. And in doing so, she had begun changing not just the town, but him. The test had come, and though it had not been easy, they had faced it together. Yet deep inside, Ethan sensed this was only the beginning. Respect gained slowly could still be lost quickly. Trust, once fragile, would need to be protected. As the desert night stretched endlessly above them, both understood that belonging is not given in a single moment. It is built step by step, choice by choice. The days that followed felt calmer on the surface, but beneath that calm something deeper was changing. The town no longer looked at Tala with the same open doubt, yet true acceptance takes time, and every small moment still carried weight. Ethan arrived in town early one morning to find a different energy in the air. People were talking, but not in whispers. They spoke about repairs needed before the next weather change, about preparing animals and supplies, about strengthening fences before the season shifted again. The last storm had reminded everyone how quickly the desert could turn. Tala stood near the well speaking with Mrs. Harper and two other women. They listened carefully as she explained how to tie stronger knots that would hold against strong winds. Her hands moved confidently, demonstrating each step with patience. For the first time since she arrived, Ethan saw genuine interest in the faces around her instead of hesitation. He leaned against the wooden railing, watching quietly. When she noticed him, she gave a small nod, her eyes softer than before. "You are teaching now," he said when she walked toward him. "They asked," she replied simply. "I shared what I know." He could hear pride in her voice, but also caution. She did not assume this change meant everything was fixed. As the week went on, more people began seeking her advice. She helped mend broken tools, guided children in tracking animals, and assisted ranchers in protecting their livestock from harsh conditions. Each task added another small layer of respect. Yet with growing visibility came new pressure. Some townspeople began expecting too much from her, treating her as someone who could solve every problem. Others watched from a distance, waiting for a mistake. One afternoon, a group of riders arrived from a neighboring area bringing news of a coming heat wave followed by strong winds. The town needed to prepare quickly. Ethan joined a meeting held outside the general store. People discussed plans, but disagreements slowed progress. Some wanted to focus on protecting buildings, others on moving animals. Voices grew louder, each person defending their own ideas. Tala stood at the edge of the crowd, silent at first. Ethan noticed her hesitation. She knew what needed to be done, but stepping forward meant risking criticism again. Finally, she spoke. "The wind will come from the east," she said calmly. "If you move the animals toward the canyon side, they will have natural protection. Tie wagons low and secure doors with cross ropes, not single lines. The heat will weaken wood. Prepare now." Her voice was clear but respectful. The crowd fell quiet. Some looked surprised. Others looked unsure. Mr. Collins nodded slowly. "She helped during the last storm," he said. "Maybe we should listen." Gradually, people agreed to follow her suggestions. Teams formed. Work began immediately. Ethan worked beside her throughout the day. He noticed how naturally she guided others without demanding control. She listened before speaking. She encouraged instead of ordering. As they secured fences together, he said, "You are becoming part of this place." She paused, considering his words. "Maybe," she said, "but belonging is not just about usefulness." He understood what she meant. Being valued only for what someone can do is not the same as being accepted for who they are. The heat arrived first, heavy and draining. The sky turned pale and the air felt thick. People moved slowly, conserving energy. Tala continued helping, checking animals, and sharing ways to keep water cool. Children followed her, curious about her stories of growing up close to nature. Their laughter softened the tension around her. Seeing this, some adults began relaxing their guarded attitudes. But not everyone changed. One evening, Ethan overheard two men near the stables speaking quietly. "She knows too much," one said. "People trust her too quickly." Ethan stepped closer. "She earned that trust," he said calmly. The men shifted uncomfortably but did not argue further. Later that night, Ethan found Tala sitting alone, looking toward the horizon where dark clouds were beginning to form. "You heard them," she said without turning. He did not pretend otherwise. "Some people fear change." She sighed softly. "I do not need everyone to like me. I only wish to be seen honestly." "You are," he replied. She glanced at him, searching his expression. "By you. And by more people each day," he added gently. The wind arrived suddenly the next morning, stronger than expected. Dust filled the air, but this time the town was ready. Wagons held firm. Animals remained calm in protected areas. Buildings stood strong. People moved with purpose instead of panic. Tala worked beside everyone else, guiding where needed but never seeking attention. Ethan watched her with quiet admiration. She had not forced herself into the community. She had grown into it through patience and strength. When the storm finally passed, relief spread across the town. Damage was minimal. People gathered in small groups, sharing food and stories. Mr. Dawson approached Tala slowly. "Your plan worked," he said. "Thank you," she nodded. "We all worked together." His smile was genuine this time. As evening settled, a small celebration formed near the center of town. Someone played music. Children ran between tables. Laughter replaced tension. Ethan stood beside Tala, watching the scene. "You changed this place," he said quietly. She shook her head. "People change when they choose to." He realized she was right. She had not forced anything. She had simply remained herself until others learned to see her clearly. Later, as the crowd thinned, she turned toward him. "When I first arrived," she said softly, "I felt invisible. Now they see me, but sometimes I wonder if they see the real me or only what I can do for them." Ethan considered her words carefully. "The ones who matter will learn the difference." She smiled faintly. "And you?" "I see someone who stands strong even when it would be easier to walk away," he said. Her eyes softened. They walked toward the edge of town together, where the desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky filled with stars. The air felt cooler, calmer after the storm. "I almost left," she admitted quietly. "Before the first storm, I thought there was no place for me here." "I'm glad you stayed," he said. She looked at him thoughtfully. "Why?" He paused, searching for honest words. "Because this place feels better with you in it." The wind moved gently around them. For the first time, Tala allowed herself to relax completely. The weight she carried seemed lighter. Behind them, the town continued slowly changing. People who once doubted her now greeted her with warmth. Children waved when she passed. Even those who remained uncertain had grown quieter. Ethan realized that standing beside her had changed him too. He spoke more openly. He listened more carefully. He felt less alone. As they watched the stars, both sensed that the hardest part of the journey might finally be behind them. Yet they also knew that true belonging is not a final destination. It is something that must be nurtured every day through patience, honesty, and courage. The town felt different now. Not completely changed, but softer around the edges. The sharp whispers that once followed Tala had faded into normal greetings. Doors that had once closed too quickly now stayed open a little longer. People still carried their habits, but they also carried new understanding. Ethan noticed it in small ways. When he rode into town, children ran past him laughing, calling Tala's name as they invited her to watch them practice writing. Mrs. Harper waved from her shop window. Even Mr. Dawson gave a respectful nod when Tala walked by. Yet despite the growing acceptance, Ethan sensed something unsettled inside her. One evening, he found her standing alone near the old wooden fence at the edge of town, looking out toward the wide desert. The sun was lowering slowly, painting the sky in warm colors. "You look far away," he said gently as he stepped beside her. "I am thinking," she replied. "About leaving?" he asked quietly. She did not answer right away. The wind moved through her hair as she watched the horizon. "When I first came here, I wanted only one thing," she said. "To be seen as human, not as a stranger, not as a rumor." "And now?" he asked. "Now they see me," she said softly, "but I am still deciding if this is home." Ethan felt those words deeply. He had always believed home was a piece of land, a house, a stable roof. But over the months, that idea had begun to change. "You don't owe this town anything," he said. "You have already given more than most." She turned to look at him. "And you, what do you owe this place?" he thought carefully. "I used to believe I owed nothing. After my family lost the ranch, I kept my distance. I worked, I traded, I went home. That was enough." "And now?" she asked. "Now I think I was hiding," he admitted. She studied him quietly. "From what?" "From being hurt again," he said honestly. "From caring too much." The air between them felt still and open. Neither rushed to fill the silence. The following week brought a new test, not from the weather or rumors, but from choice. A trader passing through town offered Tala steady work in another settlement farther west. The offer promised better pay and fewer questions about her background. Word spread quickly. Mrs. Harper mentioned it while folding laundry. "It may be a good opportunity," she said kindly. "You deserve something steady," Mr. Collins added. "You've proven yourself here." You could prove yourself anywhere. Even Mr. Dawson said, they'd be lucky to have you. Ethan listened as each person shared their thoughts. He kept his face calm, but inside he felt tension rising. That evening, he found Tala packing a small bundle in her room behind the diner. You're leaving, he said quietly. She paused, holding a folded cloth in her hands. I have not decided, she replied. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him gently. Do you want to go? She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. It would be easier, she admitted. A place where I arrive already trusted, where I do not have to prove myself every season. He nodded slowly. That sounds peaceful. But peace is not always the same as belonging, she added. He met her eyes. What does belonging feel like to you? She looked around the small room. It feels like being known, not just for what I can fix or teach, but for who I am when I am quiet. He took a step closer. And are you known here? She hesitated. By some. He understood that she meant him. The next morning, the trader prepared to leave. His wagon stood near the well, horses ready. A few townspeople gathered to say goodbye, unsure whether she would step forward. Tala stood at the edge of the crowd, her small bundle in her hands. The trader nodded politely. We leave now, he said. Ethan stood several feet away, giving her space to choose freely. His heart felt heavier than he expected. He had learned not to depend on anyone staying. The wind moved softly through the street. Tala looked around at the people who had once doubted her and now stood watching with quiet respect. She saw Mrs. Harper's hopeful smile, Mr. Dawson's steady nod, children peeking from behind the fence. Then she looked at Ethan. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she walked toward him instead of the wagon. The trader waited, then tipped his hat and climbed into his seat. The wagon rolled away slowly, disappearing down the dusty road. The crowd remained silent. Tala stood before Ethan, her voice soft but clear. Take me home, cowboy, she said. The words were not a plea. They were not spoken from weakness. They carried strength and choice. He understood what she meant. She was not asking to be saved. She was choosing where she wanted to stand. He gave a small nod. Let's go, he replied. They walked together toward his horse. As they rode out of town side by side, something felt different in the air, lighter. When they reached the ranch, the land stretched wide and open under the bright sky. The wooden house stood simple but steady. It was not grand, but it was honest. Tala stepped down from the horse and looked around slowly. It's quiet, she said. It always has been, he replied. She walked a few steps forward, taking in the fences, the barn, the open fields. It does not feel empty, she added. Ethan felt warmth in his chest. It hasn't felt full in a long time. They spent the afternoon repairing a loose gate together. No rush, no pressure, just steady work side by side. As the sun began to set, Tala stood near the porch and watched the sky change colors. This place feels like something growing, she said quietly. Ethan leaned against the railing. Then let it grow. Days turned into weeks. Tala did not hide at the ranch. She continued visiting town, teaching, helping, sharing stories. But now she returned each evening to a place where she felt chosen, not tolerated. The town noticed the difference too. People began visiting the ranch more often. Shared meals became common. Laughter carried across the fields. Ethan changed in ways he had not expected. He spoke more, he smiled more. He no longer avoided connection. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Tala spoke softly. When I first arrived, I thought I needed a town to accept me before I could feel whole, she said. Now I see that belonging begins with choosing where to stand. Ethan nodded. And standing beside someone who sees you clearly. She looked at him, her expression peaceful. The desert wind moved gently across the land, no longer harsh but steady. The town had called her less than human once. But time, courage, and quiet strength had rewritten that story. She had not demanded respect. She had built it.